Hi there folks, back again for another video. In this one it's a little bit something different. It's not wargaming related, but it is tied to a game that I'm kind of excited about at the moment. Was able to play through a Quickstart session of this not too long ago and really enjoyed it, and I just wanted to talk about the game in a little bit more detail because I've not necessarily dived into a lot of role-playing stuff of recent months, and so I thought this would be a nice opportunity for me to talk about the game and what I think about it. So previous to the Conan, the Hyborian Age role-playing game from Monolith, there was a Conan role-playing game by Modiphius, which was fair enough. It was in-depth. It had lots of different options available for it, and you could really dive in and explore the world of Conan in its various forms. But one of the things that I think put a lot of people off was that the 2d20 mechanic was a little clunky, and I think that mechanically the game kind of suffered because of that. Monolith have come in, and as the designers of the board game, they could very easily have just taken the board game mechanics and translated that into a role-playing game, but what they've done here is that they've really explored the options available to them by being a little bit more unique when it comes to their role-playing games. And so with Conan and this new role-playing game that they've put together here through Kickstarter, which wasn't too long ago, I think they've created something pretty fantastic and something that feels like it fits the themes and the style of the Conan world. And I think it's something that sometimes gets lost in the era of Dungeons and Dragons, where everything has to be a 5e port or something, and it has to have a d20 mechanic and all that kind of thing. What Monolith have done is kind of really explored the idea of having a bespoke system for the game so that it's designed to fit the world, and I think that's really important. And I think that certainly comes across in Conan and what they've done with the Hyborian Age here. So this is just the Quick Start, which is free for you to download already from the folks at Monolith. It was available through the Kickstarter, but it's also available over on their website as well. So you can download this and have a go at the game. It comes with a series of pre-made characters alongside a full pre-made adventure that will either take you between 1 and 2 sessions to complete, depending on how in-depth you go. But it also sort of takes you through the kind of core mechanics of the game as well. I think all the themes that they kind of note here on the right-hand side very much come through in the mechanics, which we'll have a talk about in a second as well. So inherently, what happens with Conan and the kind of base mechanic of the game is that it all uses a variety of poly dice for you to do certain checks in the game, and they're all based off both might, edge, grit, and wits. If we scroll through to the characters, this would be a great way to kind of explore this in a little bit more detail. So here with Angus, the warrior from the hills, they have a might value of 5, but when they roll for a check, they'll roll a d6. They have a edge value of 4, but when they roll for a check, they'll add a d6, etc. Same for grit and wits. And essentially what happens is you'll take the value of your dice, whatever you've rolled, and you'll apply that to the value that you have in order to pass the check. You will also roll what's called a flex die. A flex dice is a d10 to begin with, but it goes down as you go through the game and sort of level up. The main thrust of that is that if you ever roll the highest amount on the flex dice, it unlocks special abilities for you. And special things can happen. So it works a little bit like the stunt dice do in the Dragon Age role-playing game, if you've played that before, but with a little less kind of bookkeeping and trying to check what you can do. It's kind of broken down into this little table here, as you can see, although there are also additional things. So if you ever roll the flex result on the dice, and obviously as it goes down, it'll be a 10, an 8, a 6, etc., etc. You're able to either regain stamina, make something that would have failed to pass, or just do extra damage on the roll for a damage check. As you can see, the kind of basic level of difficulty is all measured there as well. And again, this is all based on the idea of rolling a dice plus your stat in order to see if you pass. There's plenty of very good examples throughout the Quick Start which kind of get you into the idea of how that works. And then you can modify that as a storyteller, as a GM, by adding 1, 2, or 3 to that, depending on whether or not you think that the difficulty of the check is going to be important. So say, for example, if the players think really well about a situation and they put themselves in an advantageous position, don't be afraid to give them a couple of extra bonuses to their dice roll. And I think that should be encouraged, especially in a game as cinematic and kind of like over the top as Conan. Combat is also pretty darn brutal. I played the Quickstart, and there were a couple of times where it was a little bit hairy for the players. You'll get a number of actions that you can do each turn. These can be changed by skills that the characters have as well. But in essence, you have the ability to move and attack and manipulate and all that kind of thing. And they cost a number of actions depending on what you're going to do. This does mean that you can attack twice, but because there's no penalty for like moving in and out of combat with somebody, depending on, well, unless you do something specifically to try and stop that, there is the opportunity for there to be a lot more movement in the game. I will also say that this kind of sort of flips quite nicely into the idea of distances and that kind of stuff when it comes to Conan, rather than having like squares that you're thinking about and, you know, having to measure 5 feet or 10 feet or 20 feet. Instead, you have ranges done in bands. So you've got touch, close, medium, long, and distant. And that all applies to when you can use certain abilities and when you can attack someone in close combat and all that kind of thing. And it just means that, once again, you can be slightly more dynamic with the way that you set up your role-playing games and your encounters, because you're not then suddenly having to worry about whether or not a particular character or a monster or something is exactly 25 feet away, so that your player can't get within 20 feet to hit it with an attack or something, or a spell and stuff like that. So it engenders a slightly more dynamic sense of play, which I think is very important in role-playing games, especially nowadays. And it means that you can play a lot more stuff in mind's eye rather than having to worry about miniatures and all that kind of stuff on the tabletop, which is handy. Damage is pretty brutal, as you might have guessed. You will always have the ability to do like a certain amount of damage to a character, even if they've got things like armor and stuff on. But one of the things that I really liked was that is the way that damage is dealt to kind of minions and stuff. So normally antagonists will have life points the same as player characters, and life points are essentially, as you might have guessed, your life points. And so when that kind of goes down to 0, you will have to check for death. Minions, on the other hand, to give you the idea of like Conan scything his way through endless amounts of enemies because he's a mighty warrior. If they lose their life points, they're just out for the count. But what's really cool is that if they if the attack inflicts an amount of damage equal to or greater than the threshold, the minion is instantly killed. But the other thing that I really like is this bit here. If the attack inflicts an amount of damage less than the minion's threshold, then the GM should note that the minion has been hit. Once hit, any subsequent attack that deals at least 1 damage will kill that minion. So this means that you can, as it says here, maintain the brisk pace of combat that you're fighting. And it means that minions don't kind of clog up the game, and you don't have to worry too much about how they work. They can still be deadly, of course, but I think what's really nice about that is that it gives the effect of kind of like battling your way through waves of mooks before you finally destroy the true target of your endeavors. This is also pretty brutal. Like, when you go down, you have to pass a grit check, which is difficulty 8, and you can use the fleck dice in order to pass this, but if you fail that, you're essentially dead, unless you have a fateful intervention. This can come around quicker than you think, and I've had characters on the edge of death multiple times playing through this, but I really like that they've kind of added this in, so it actually makes you really think about how you engage in combat and, the cost of that, especially in, worlds like Dungeons & Dragons, where everybody can basically live forever because, they go down, they get back up again and they're healed. They go down, they get back up again, they're healed, blah, 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 blah. So I think this really helps to kind of like build on the brutality of the Conan world. What's also quite nice is that they give you the license to make the difficulty of that check harder and harder every time you go down. So maybe you start it at 8, then it goes to 9, then it goes to 10. So it just mirrors the fact that eventually fate is going to catch up with you and kill you, which I think is a really nice bonus thing there as well. It should also be, I think it's worth having a look at how monsters work and stuff, but you can also use your stamina points, which are kind of like another resource in the game, in order to boost certain things, so give you bonuses to your attacks, make additional moves and all that kind of stuff. Your stamina points are another resource that you have to worry about, and it's used often to cast spells and all sorts of other things as well. There is a little bit of magic in the game, but what's quite nice is that magic is a bit esoteric, I suppose you'd say, which kind of makes sense, I suppose, in the Conan world. Yes, there are people that cast spells in Conan, but for the majority of the time, magic and stuff is a little bit more sort of like airy-fairy and doesn't quite make sense, and people don't really necessarily understand it. So when you come up against anyone who can cast spells or use magic in some way, there's always some really interesting cost and kind of like back and forth built into the way that works. So I really like that there are things like Call Wolf, where you spend 5 life points in order to use the action, which I think is great because it means that there's an inherent cost to that beyond just the use of resources in the game, which is good. I won't go too deep into the actual adventure, just in case you want to run it yourself, but it's called The Seal of Acheron, and it is a very well put together little adventure that is full of really dangerous stuff, as well as some interesting social encounters, and a few other bits and pieces. I will take a look at the first scene, or scenes, however, I suppose, just to give you an idea of how kind of enemies work. So we had a little bit of a look at characters, but enemies have a really nice thing that's been sort of built into their stat blocks. So obviously you can see the dice that they're going to be rolling for various checks and kind of like their inherent value for that. But then they've done what's a really nice thing where they have a variable defense score. So this is so that on the fly you can adapt things, because there's no maths matrix that you have to come up with for setting out the perfect encounter, because things can be so varied and so different in the Conan world. Having this ability to change things up on the fly makes a really massive impact on the game, because maybe you've set up something that you think is going to be an incredibly simple encounter, but the enemy starts to get the drop on your opponents, but you don't really want them to die because you're a storyteller, you're not just out there to kill your players. Maybe at that point you lower their physical defense so that you make it slightly easier for them to deal with the situation. Or equally, maybe the encounter was meant to be hard, but they're finding it really easy, so you just bump up the threshold and you come up with a reason why that has happened on the fly, which I think is quite a nice little bonus. And as you'll see, they have like an inherent built threshold on some of these, so it's 5 for a hyena, 4 for a wild dog, and 3 for a bandit. So once they hit that level, they're just gone, effectively, which is a nice little touch. But again, it kind of feeds into the idea of dynamic play and building up that cool idea of movie-style combat, comic book-style combat on the tabletop, where you've got these larger-than-life heroes doing cool things, but also facing a challenge at the same time as and when it's appropriate. As I say, I'm not going to go through the entire of the adventure, but you could have a look at that for yourself if you're a GM or a storyteller. You do have a couple of characters that you can choose from, all of them kind of fitting into the different sort of like touchstones of Conan. So you have a thief, you have the barbarian, you have the sort of like hunter from the wilds, you have the strange shamanistic priest, and you have your other warriors as well. And this kind of gives you a nice little breakdown of kind of like how things look on a character sheet when they start out. So we've obviously talked about their stats and how that kind of works and sort of what you're looking for there. There's your inbuilt defenses, so that's what the enemy's trying to hit in order to hit you. There's your stamina points, that you'll use in order to do special things. Weapons are all then broken down into very simple and quick and easy ways for you to work out how things work. There's no complicated things here. Tells you the range that you need to use it at, the type of attack it is, and what it is and the damage that's inherent to that. And then armor if that's required. You will also have a set of skills and origin bonuses that come from creating your characters, and these will just give you bonus things that are already inherently built into these characters, as you see here, but it's just something to bear in mind when it comes to actually making characters for the game. And as I say, there's a couple of them for you to choose from at the moment, so it's definitely worth having a look at this and seeing what kind of stories you can tell. I would heartily recommend giving the Quickstart a playthrough just to see what you think. It's very fast, very dynamic. It's a bit brutal at the same time, and it should be fun for both players and the storytellers at the same time. I will say that there is a pledge manager open for the Kickstarter at the moment. You can see that I went in for the Adventurers pledge, so just, as a fair warning, I've played the game and I've backed the game, so yeah, you take that as you will when it comes to your opinions on what I think about the game and how I go forward. But again, they've done a really nice job of kind of like building on the offering here and creating something that is like very well rounded. The pledge tiers go from kind of like your basic sort of digital pledge. I say pledge when you think about the pledge manager, of course. You also have all the other bonus adventure books and things that are available as PDFs there as well. There is also the physical core book, which is what I've gone for, alongside the physical Tales of the Hyborian Age volumes, which are going to be fun to dive into, especially for someone who doesn't necessarily have the time to write a lot of big stories and things. It would be nice to have that available to me, alongside a very handy GM screen and companion, which will be useful in the midst of combat, and also some dice, because why wouldn't you want some lovely dice to play around with, which is all good. So yeah, the Kickstarter is still got a pledge manager open at the moment, so if you're somebody who's looking to get stuck in, you do have access to that. I will say it's definitely worth going and checking out some of the interviews and stuff that people have done, as well as some of the unboxings, I suppose, or and stuff like that about the game, to kind of like see how it all works. We had a little bit of a talk about it on Tabletop when I put together a little bit of a news piece on it, and I think it's a really nice little game to get stuck into, especially if you're reading the new Conan comics and stuff. I think this kind of really fits in with that and kind of what their vision is for Conan going forward in the near future, as a property. I would also recommend. I'm not going to show it here, just because there's a lot of sort of pages from inside. Inside the kind of media copy of it that they don't necessarily want to be seen, but are there for you to go and have a look at if you want to. But if you go over to the Facebook group for Conan, which I will put in the description down below, they do actually have someone who's managed to kind of screen cap quite a lot of the pages from the current version of the rules. So if you want to make characters, you can actually make characters very quickly. I will say that the character creation process is very well done. I was able to make a character that felt interesting and dynamic and kind of mine within about 15 minutes. And that's from someone diving into making a character for the very first time, playing Conan the Hyborian Age and not using the Quickstart stuff. So I would highly recommend going to check that out and giving it a read for yourself, because you'll be able to make some fun characters and play beyond the Quickstart rules very, very easily without too much hassle, which I think is fantastic. So yeah, that is Conan, the Hyborian Age, the new role-playing game from the folks at Monolith Editions. Or Monolith Games now. I can't remember exactly how they refer to themselves. Monolith Board Games, there you go. They've done a really nice job with this one to kind of make it feel like it fits the theme of Conan, and I would definitely recommend checking it out for yourself if you are someone who likes Conan but was put off by the Modiphius role-playing game and wants something a little simpler and easier to get your head around. This certainly does that, as well as nailing the themes and the ideas of this world and what it has to offer. And that Quickstart adventure is great fun as well, so definitely worth having a look at in more detail. Go and check this out. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff. There's also a Ko-fi link down there if you would like to donate, but you don't have to. If you're someone who is interested in role-playing games, please let me know, because I think it'd be fantastic to learn a little bit more about the audience and what you like. I'd love to talk a little bit more about the Discworld RPG as well, that has been hitting Kickstarter from the folks at Modiphius, weirdly enough. I'll talk about more stuff in the future. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will stop my rambling and vanish off into the ether to do another video. So yes, tatty buys. Hope you enjoyed this look at Conan, and I'll speak to you all again very soon. Bye for now.